Clubhouse.
Welcome back to Escaping Gilead. This is Pod Clubhouse's continuing coverage of Hulu's The Handmaid's Tale. This is for the season and series finale called The Handmaid's Tale. This is Paul.
This is Caroline.
After we got done watching this finale, we started our analysis just immediately in lots of ways. One way that I like to do it was, since I put my opinions out there for other people to know, is did the finale meet my predictions or my expectations? And I found that they went in a different direction than I would have gone had I been in charge.
Do tell, what would you have done?
Well, you might recall that I predicted that Gilead would respond immediately in force and things would get rough there in Boston. As a side note, I'd like to posit that perhaps Boston is not Boston like we think about in terms of just a dot on the map. Because why would Gilead have the exact same state lines that the United States did?
Okay.
Maybe Boston is actually like a region.
Okay.
So maybe, yeah, because we've seen various maps of Gilead and they're very kind of unspecific, but most of them show that there is this dip in the border that's sort of like a contested area that basically goes from Canada, stretches through New Hampshire and Vermont, and basically touches Massachusetts, which isn't that close to Boston exactly, but close enough that you could start to think of these drives that they were making about getting to the border, getting to there.
You said Massachusetts is not that close to Boston.
Well, the part where the dip touches is in the northwest corner.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
I like to think that maybe Boston covers a bigger chunk of the map than just
the city.
the city.
Okay, I like that idea.
So what they're fighting for is more like a state than just the city.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that they confirmed that with the third star on the flag. I mean, they got Massachusetts as a whole. So I think that you're right, that we could consider it much more than just simply the city. We're like the region of Boston. So let's talk about the fact that they did this in 19 days. I compared this to like the Battle of Gettysburg in a previous episode, where I feel like anyone who was expecting to be told like the end of the war, they were wrong to think that expectation. Like, we always knew that this was simply a stop in time. This is a battle that they had. I'm going to call it now the Battle of Boston, because if you look at it from beginning to end, that's really what it was. The entire series was the Battle of Boston. We saw it fall at the beginning and we see it come back at the end. Now, one of the lines that was like delicious for me about that was Serena Joy saying, "I helped Boston fall twice." Oh, that was such a good line. But back to your expectations of this episode. Tell me more about what you were hoping for and sort of how did it click for you?
Well, one safe prediction that I had based on my foreknowledge of the Testaments was that Gilead would remain standing at the end of this episode, which they did. Licking their wounds, but still mostly intact.
And definitely like rearranging. I mean, we get that bit of information that Mackenzie with, his daughter Hannah will be moving over to DC, which was like a really huge bit of information that we got in terms of like, obviously they're shuffling everybody around.
They say Western commanders had been promoted.
They're definitely scrambling.
I can understand why they went this way, and like, if you're thinking of it in like literary terms, episode 9 was the climax, but that doesn't mean the book is over. You still need to tie up the loose ends, the denouement. And that's very much the purpose that this episode served.
And I think to your point, I mean, that's actually, I think, a really nice homage to the book itself. We got the Handmaid's Tale portion, and then there is the epilogue at the end where you get the context of why we have this and everything, which, listeners, we're going to do a little bit something different at the end for you guys, since a lot of you may not have read the book and Paul has. He's going to read you a little bit about the context of after everything and how it ties into June writing the book.
So look forward to that. And I also thought that there would be more character deaths. Again, I went too dark for what they were going to go after with their own goals.
And having gone to the Paley Center exhibit and seeing Elisabeth Moss talk about this, I mean, she talked a lot about how she wanted everyone to leave with hope and the idea to keep fighting and always keep hope. And so it is not shocking to me that they didn't have deaths and that type of thing in this episode, because it was about leaving everyone with hope. Not everything got finished. This is just an individual battle that we shared with you, but good things did happen. Some people did have some happy moments, and we definitely had that in this episode. There was a couple of things that I want to hit on before we really like just jump entirely into this. I want to talk about the concept of using the flashbacks and trying to help a lot of our watchers be able to remember where we started and what was the whole setup. And for me, I think the use of flashbacks was a good idea. I don't think they chose the right flashbacks, not for what the episode ended up being, maybe for what the series ended up being in terms of like, we're looking for Hannah, like all the flashbacks, the carousel, the carnival, the aquarium, you know, her getting taken again, all the moments of these flashbacks were like, okay, but that's completely emblazoned in our minds. I could have used a couple flashbacks of remembering like how Emily and June met, or a flashback if you want to do back to when Luke and June met. Like you could have had moments where she was going back and talking to these people for the final time we're seeing them and have a flashback to when we first saw them, or an important moment about them, including the fact that June was a book editor, which would have helped, I think, a lot of people understand the writing of the book at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
This is June's story, not Hannah's story. This is June's part of the story. And I feel like we should have had flashbacks more of June than just of Hannah.
I can agree with that. When I was also thinking through my predictions of this episode, and I commented on the directing style of the previous one, that there had been an adoption of the necessity of including action, which is not too frequent in the Handmaid's Tale. But I also thought that there was kind of a lot of slow-mo and other choices that maybe kept the camera on the lead for a very long time. And when the lead is the director, you sort of get a little suspicious about that.
Oh, Lord.
But I wondered if she was going to go back to that more sentimental style that she had used in the earlier episodes of this season that she had directed, like the one where she finds Holly, and there's lots of slow motion and blurry lenses and that, and she went with that. So
yeah, which I again, that's what I'm talking about. Like we got more into this like feelings, you know, like there's a lot of feelings about that's going on in this episode, and you're right. I think that the way that it was shot really conveyed that.
I could have done completely without the flashback montages, asides, all of them.
Well, the one that really I feel like is the most divisive is the karaoke whole thing. I feel like it was like a real life thing. We want to bring back these actors because
that's all I think it was.
We're going to have a cast party and also like give them one more paycheck and let them show their faces one more time. But I really feel like that was not anything that any of us needed to see. And Landslide was too prominent in This Is Us to use in this, I feel like, because it felt like, oh, you're using a This Is Us song.
Well, it's got its own weight on its own.
I know it does, but at the same time, I just feel like it wasn't for me.
You could edit it out and you'd go from the refugee center to the bonfire with the cloak, and you'd understand.
Yeah, you totally would. Let's talk about that bonfire for a moment, because that's really one of the only times we get to see Moira and Rita, who really got kind of the bum's rush in this last episode. You know, they give some knowing glances, that kind of thing. I have to say, though, the moment that the camera focused on the Gilead flag burning, I mean, come on. If you had any heart at all, you were cheering. I mean, you were like, yes.
Oh, I liked raising the 3-star flag.
Oh my gosh, yes. That was wonderful. So we had a lot of those moments. I'm very torn on the idea that she burned her handmaid's cloak, because she's still continuing the fight. And I feel like that cloak is actually like very important. It's like her invisibility cloak to be able to get back into Gilead. And so in many ways, I'm like, but now what? Now you're going to have to make like a makeshift one, because you're absolutely going to have to wear that again.
There's no shortage of them. But it kind of reminded me of also...
Yeah, but it's hers, Paul. It's hers.
Remember the escape attempt where she lived in the Boston Globe building for a while?
Yeah.
Didn't she burn that shit in the furnace in that one too?
Yeah, I mean, she definitely did burn stuff. Yes.
So
a little bookend there.
Or just like, I've seen this before. I don't know. Bookends are supposed to be like,
Well,
oh,
that's
look
where-
at that neat resonance.
That's where I kind of feel like maybe she should have started to throw it in the fire and think better of it and maybe like tossed it over her shoulder. Like, this is still my ammo. Like, this, as much as I want this stage and phase to be over, it's actually not. For me, I think symbolically, I would have actually liked her to hang on to that. Again, it's her invisibility cloak. It's the way she gets back into the masses. And you can say, well, there's many of them, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they're like obviously like hemmed to their height and all that kind of stuff. Like, and it's hers. This is like the one that got her through. I think if you asked a soldier in the war, you would say, well, why don't you just throw away the backpack or the uniform that you wore in war or whatever? You could just get another one. But it's like, but that's the one that I wore to get through it. I understand that it was closure on one hand, but on the other hand, she was still fighting. So if the war continues...
Symbolism was more important to her.
So what did you think about Moira and Rita's like kind of lack of send-off?
I mean, they've been there since like day one.
Especially Moira.
You know? And Moira had those scenes where she was yelling at June about June trying to like override her new responsibilities with the resistance, and for that to just kind of wind up with
just knowing glances, really.
Yeah.
Not much more. Yeah, it was kind of surprising. I mean, of course, they were given much more prominence throughout the season. Like you said, there were actually conversations. Rita obviously played a huge role in the ending of Boston's, occupation.
Yeah, she's a hero.
So in many ways, like what's done is done. I like that you said she's a hero because maybe that would have been something if they had a little moment to like thank the ones that did it. I feel like that could have been something. Okay, now the shocker of this one was the return of Emily. What did you think about that?
That sentimentality, I didn't mind.
I didn't mind at all.
I've wanted to know how she wound up. She tells us how it all went down.
And why she's still fighting. She's still fighting for Oliver.
So I like that kind of thing in a finale.
And the beautiful like scene of them like walking along the wall, obviously seeing the three guardians hanging from the wall, all the writing of, my name is, all the different names and everything. It was so amazing from back at the beginning and remembering, them walking along that same route together. Of course, they even had the initial moment at the ice cream shop, and that was their original meeting, if everybody doesn't remember that part. I thought they did a beautiful job with her. I know it was a little bit hard to kind of bring her back in because she did leave so abruptly, and we know that was real life, invading into the show. They didn't let the character just go. Alexis Bledel needed to go. There's a whole thing here that I feel like we needed. We needed that closure, that she was okay and that she was still going to be fighting right alongside of June. There's something very comforting for me about that.
It helps pull the overall average up for my score, I guess, for the parts that I wish had gone another direction. This was great.
Yeah.
And it didn't... it
didn't feel forced or anything to me. Like,
no,
it didn't feel like
natural.
Oh my gosh, she just came out of nowhere. Like it was like, oh, yay, she's okay. And it makes sense that like Mayday would have been like converging onto Boston. Like it's logical that people would be flocking to Boston.
Unlike other scenes of closure that occur with completely no explanation, Emily told us everything about it, which was great.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to one of those scenes. The Janine, Charlotte, Lydia, Naomi scene. Oh my gosh, you guys, this was exciting and happy and tension-filled, but also confusing as all get out.
The only indication we got prior to that was that Mark was working on getting Janine with Aunt Lydia's help. Then all of a sudden, they're there.
I'm okay with Janine, but Charlotte, I don't understand at all. We had, even as recently as just a couple of episodes ago, Naomi being like, she is not coming back into this house. I will never allow her to have this child back. Like, I mean, what? And then honestly, I also had this other little sadness that Lawrence and that scene where he's like, please read her this book. We're on chapter 9. Here's where we are. That's gone. That's lost. Because that information wasn't conveyed to Janine. The book wasn't passed on to her. There was no information that this was like anything. And so there's something about it that just feels like, oh gosh, that kind of cut Commander Lawrence's last moments with Charlotte like right off, like in a way that seems it took all the bite out of that,
Well, and for Naomi's motivation, she's twice widowed. And we know that wives without husbands are people without status. Exactly. Right. Unless it gets sorted out. We've never seen what actually happens if they stay single too long, but maybe it's because it doesn't happen.
Hints of things like the colonies and unwomen and all that biz, right? I mean...
And so without a child...
Yeah, she loses all status. Why would she be willing to do that? I'm fine with us just saying, okay, Mark did it. We've seen other like swaps where like they got Fred, you know, in the same similar type of thing with like, you know, we're at the border and we just shove Fred across, you know, very similar, but... I wish that he would have said something like we had some amount of talks or something and
an exchange.
I don't know. And I don't know that the exchange needed to be a person. Like maybe it could have been something else. I don't know what, resources, money, maybe even. I don't know. I don't know what they would want, but maybe they need something. Some sort of trade would have made more sense. That scene was just wacky to me. How much can you let go of the wackiness to say, well, at least we saw Lydia one more time. And at least we saw Janine and Charlotte reuniting.
It doesn't completely balance out the wacky. Like we've said all along, it's important that Lydia stay in Gilead because she has a very pivotal role coming in the next series. Now, how it is that she went from the gallows to wearing her ant hat again, completely unexplained.
You're right. That scene actually brings up more questions than just the Charlotte, Naomi, Janine part, but like how was Lydia like reinstated? Now, hopefully they answer that in the testaments, right? They're allowed to like leave some sort of loose ends because we know there's more coming and we're going to see her again. So whether they do it in some sort of flashback or whether they have to set up that initial series episode with, oh yeah, here's what happened, you know, I don't know how they're going to do it exactly, but I was glad to see her. She actually looked a lot better. It made me think that they filmed that a while ago or something because Ann Dowd looked healthier and better, I feel like, in that scene.
She did. You want me to ruin your Janine finale?
I don't know. Do I?
Let's see. Let's try this on for size.
Okay.
She still thinks Caleb is alive.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay, remember a couple of episodes ago when we were like, hey, didn't she have another kid? Whatever happened to that kid? Doesn't she still need to go get that kid? Okay, well, we remembered there was the entire situation where Caleb was actually sent out to California and was in a car accident and died. And June said to her that Caleb is fine. Caleb's out in California, all this stuff, right? Oh my God, what? You're right. Janine is still going to spend the rest of her life being like, I need to get Caleb like you need to get Hannah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That was a weird thing to remember, you guys. And it was like, oh, June, what did you do? So let's talk about Mark, because Mark was the one who arranged this. I'm just going to say it was some sort of prisoner swap because who knows what really happened there. My goodness, a lot of change for this guy. I mean, he went from such a mild-mannered, pencil pusher kind of feel of a dude, really, for me, to, I'm sorry, a commander?
When I heard him say that,
there has to be something about that, right? I mean, what is it supposed to tell us? Is it like...
Well, he's a big deal. He's a big deal.
Nah. You could use any word in the world. There is a reason to use the word commander. What does it mean? Is it like somehow America could like have this regime and now he's a commander for America? And like, what does that mean?
Maybe it's like taking the word back.
Maybe.
But I mean, commander is a legit rank in the military, but it's only a rank in the Navy.
Oh, a wacky, extra wacky.
You could be a commander of like a base, so it's like a position.
Okay.
But I still think, and this is just, if you have better data than that, please let me know because I want to be right on these things. I still think if you're the colonel or the general or whatever in charge of a base, they call you colonel or general. They don't general so-and-so commander of this base, or whatever.
Right.
Maybe he is a commander in the Navy, but that doesn't make any sense.
No, but there's something about it that makes me feel like it a little feels like a warning is what I'm trying to say. Like it feels like now you're the one in power and now you're calling yourself a commander. And there's something about it that feels like even the best of people can switch, right, and become more sinister.
I'm not going to go that way.
I'm going that way because, and I'm not saying Mark's going to, I'm just saying that it's still it feels like a warning to me. Like anytime you get to this kind of point where people are like, trying to collect up as much power and control as you possibly can, and now you start using that word again, it just feels like hinky to me. Like, oh no, use completely different words. Do not. And I get what you're saying. It's a little like throwing the cloak away. There's something about like reestablishing yourself, like taking the words back, taking your identity back, all the things, right? But I don't know, you guys. I would love to hear what you guys think, because that line when he turns around and says, actually, it's Commander, I like fell on the floor at that. It's such a small thing, but it is such a big thing for me.
And for a character who they just decided to give us all the deets on at the last second before he's all done. You know, the ex-wife, the kid, the
Which
motivation.
We knew some of that stuff. I mean, he definitely talked about Hawaii, of course. Like, we remember the matchbook and all that stuff with the phone number and everything on it. But I do have to say, like, we have to talk about Mark in that conversation with SJ, or Serena, because is it just me, or was there still chemistry between those two birds?
Well, I think the whole reason that he shipped her out was because of that chemistry. I think he arranged for her to slip through the cracks, like the administrative cracks, like, oh, we lost your paperwork or whatever it would take for her to just, because she showed up to a place where they weren't ready for her.
Oh, completely. And the children were not even allowed.
It seemed like the woman that was helping her was going to try to help her sort it out as best she could. Given you're living in a world where they don't have that many births, diapers might be hard to find.
I think they would be.
Yeah, I think it was that element of, I'm going to hide you in plain sight. And like he says, I'll find you.
I felt weird about it only because it felt like almost like being back on that train again. And like at any point in time, one person in that shelter could be like, wait a minute, I know who you are, and completely blow her up her spot. I do want to mention that I had read an article that Bruce Miller, who wrote this episode, was talking about the arc of Serena Joy, and he was talking about that he wanted to kill her actually when she fell off that train, that being pushed from the train and just being found, this is the quote, because I think she's such a horrible person, being dead on the side of the road, completely anonymous, after she was pushed from the train at the beginning of the final season, would have been a fitting end. I had to be convinced not to throw her off that train along with the kid. I love that. It was amazing. So apparently the other showrunners, Eric Tuchman and Yaling Chang, who took over more when Miller moved over to the Testaments, they were the one who was like, look, we can't lose
Yvonne.
And that basically when I look back at this season, my God, what a different season we would have had, because so much of what happened, really, Serena was a huge player. We would not have had a wedding. We would not have had a wedding to poison people with. And who would have given us the information about the commander's plane? And she played so many instrumental parts to this. And of course, just all the conversations we had between her and June and the final forgiveness that she gets from June. I'm kind of blown away that Bruce was going to kill her. I'm so curious. If I had a moment with him, my question would be, okay, if you killed her at the beginning of season 6, how would the rest of season 6 have played out? Like how would that have unfolded? Who would have come into those different roles? How would we have done this? I would be so curious to find out what he had in mind.
I can't remember everything I ever said about Serena Joy and all the podcasts. No, I can't. So
it's only been 8 years.
I might have said that she's better off dead. However, this season, I was more interested in the redemption arc that they did pursue. I know that's not going to make everybody happy that they tried to rehabilitate her. On the one hand, I could have done without the scene in the refugee place where she winds up. Because first of all, where is that? That's what helps me think of Boston under that theory I gave before as being more of a region, less of a city. Because where would that bus have to go?
I don't know. There's a lot of question marks about the bus, actually. I have a question about busing from Alaska, actually. I have a lot of questions about transportation.
So once they get to the refugee center and we see that she is taken down to the handmaid's level. What was it? The quote, the cot,
Yeah, I mean, it was a chair, a table, a bed, and like that's all you pretty much need. That's obviously very much, echoing the ending of, a chair, a table, all that stuff.
Seeing her like that, seeing her accept that she has nothing except for her son and a Red Sox onesie, that was as good for me.
Can we talk about that Red Sox onesie for a minute? Because I want to talk about the previous conversation when that Red Sox onesie comes up. First of all, a little confusing on how old that baby is. Because that baby was like 18 months old at some points when she's like holding it. But
that should be a very small baby still.
But then in the shelter, it was like a peanut. It was back to infant sized. So it was so funny because she holds up this onesie that June is giving her that is so little. It's so little. And the boy she's holding in her arms is like way older than that onesie. Very funny. But here's the thing I want to talk about that scene that I really am boggled by. Okay, you have Serena saying, I don't know where I'm going to go. I can't get a passport with Canada. I can't get a passport with the EU. Obviously, I can't go back to Gilead. I am like a woman without a country, right? Mm-hmm. And June's answer to that is just be his mother. Now, guys, unless there is a land called Mom Land that I am missing entirely, how is that even? It's like, how are you? And the person's like, tomorrow. Like, I'm sorry, what? That conversation didn't make any sense. I don't know if they edited some stuff out of that conversation for time or something else. Where do I live and just be his mother is not a back and forth conversation. So I appreciate what you're saying that like at the end, we see her sitting on the cot. We see her with the sun shining on her. She's crying. She's cradling the baby, and it's like, okay, I am just satisfied to finally have my son and do all this kind of stuff. And that's what I did everything for.
Which she technically had at the farm earlier in the season, but that's neither here nor there.
Stayed there, really, honestly. Like the fact that we had that extra blip for her, I mean, that does feel like where it changed, right? Because if Bruce was going to kill her on the train, then the farm, and everything that happens from then on out is like we have to make her go evil again in order to bring her into the fold. Mm-hmm. To me, Serena had no redemption arc, in my opinion, at the end of the day. I understand she says she's sorry. I totally get it. I hear that she says she's ashamed. I totally get it. But guys, 5 minutes ago, she was willing to marry a commander, willing to live in New Bethlehem, willing to open a fertility clinic where she had prisoner women helping out with this fertility. She's still messed up. Like no part of her feels like totally healed. It just feels like she's in a nicer package in a little way.
Well, I think that going through that process did disassemble her in some way, hopefully. You made a point that if all of a sudden they're like, okay, we need a room leader.
Oh, yes.
You, the tall one.
Yes, yes.
Then things might start to turn again.
Exactly. Or we were like, we need someone to make the rules and we would like to have like a hierarchy of people. So like, who would like to decide who's on the council of ladies and who would... Tell me she is not rushing to the front. Come on, right? So that's where I'm saying like her heart is not actually different. She did have a moment with an individual character, June. She recognized the trauma and the pain that the two individuals had inflicted on each other in their various ways, even though like I'm super eye roll on all the comments like anything June did to Serena, I mean, whatever. So those two characters need to reconcile, but her as a human, nah. Dark side, evil, Darth Vaderus.
Could you imagine, like, fast forward, like 3 or 4 years, Noah's ready for, like, pre-K, and
I taught pre-K, like, that's why Paul can say stuff like that.
Should I be on the PTA or, like...
Oh, like 2 seconds. Then she's going to start censoring the books. Like, I don't think that we should be talking about bath time with Billy over here. Right. Like, whatever. Like, you know that she is going to find some kernel of control like that. And you're exactly right. She's going to eat it right back up again.
Should we really be hopping on pop?
Right. Exactly. So, Serena Joy, I mean, overall, how do we feel about how they kind of wrapped her up?
We could have just put her on the bus and that was actually okay for me. But
because we do have the forgiveness.
We have the forgiveness.
That was a lot about what season 6 was a lot. I mean, they talked about that
over
repeatedly.
and over. Yeah.
Like, do you forgive me now? Do you forgive me now?
So since I didn't need her dead, and seeing her so humbled was pretty satisfying for me.
Okay. I'm
going to go with a plus mark on that story ender. What about you?
Like I said, I still think that she's like evil to the core, man. I just don't. I think that she is humbled because she's in a position where she has to be humble, you know, in order to literally stay alive. So in that regard, yeah, she's keeping it cool. But I think if there was a crack and she could get them a little bit of control, she'd take it.
The rules of the show would suggest that she should have died because Nick and Joseph died.
Okay.
Did they have their good qualities? Yes. But did they ultimately choose the dark path? Yes. Mm-hmm. You know, Serena, to your point, invented the dark path.
Via a book, which I totally want to like point out and remind everybody, because of course that's going to play into June's ending here. Remember, it was Serena's book that really started all of this thinking about creating this other place and all of this really insanity, really.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so let's talk about June and Luke, because I felt so weird about these two. We had a really nice conversation previous episodes where they were trying to sort out, are we really just together because of Hannah, or is there something more still between us? Was there something there ever between us, or was it really always about Hannah? So I kind of thought we kind of put that a little bit to rest. Like I kind of thought they said like, yes, we do still love each other. Yes, we have something that's outside of Hannah. It's not just about being parents. This scene didn't reflect that conversation.
Almost like they didn't have it.
Yeah, which was strange to me. I appreciated, you know, that we had like the light bulb scene, the literal light bulb scene after she like throws her cloak in, you know, and it like lights up. And that's obviously Luke doing that because he says he's going to go work with the electric company. So that was like very symbolic, very beautiful of them like still working together in some way. But the fact that they just like turned on their heels from one another and was like, smell you later, heading in different directions, that felt so weird. I felt like they should have hugged. There should have been something like we will get back together again, like hang on.
Well, couples have discussions that go like this. What do you think we should do?
Yeah.
They don't have so what are your plans?
And these are my plans.
Right.
And then
I'm going into the war zone. I'm going into another war zone. Okay, bye.
Yeah. And just okay, bye. Not hug, not like, I can't believe it. Can you believe it where we are? Not like, it was odd. It was kind of one of those, again, where we were talking about this with Serena Joy, too much, actually. Like they should have just had a quicker little moment, maybe just a side hug or whatever's going on. We didn't actually need them to talk that much because it was too much talking that had no love behind it. And then that really, like you said, negated the previous conversation that like, no, we really love each other and we're going to stick together.
But at least we got a karaoke scene that happens in the imagination of June.
Right. So that part was kind of, I don't know, you guys, Luke and June, very odd. I guess the ups and downs with them and how this all played out for them. I don't think no matter what, even if they had Hannah back, I do not believe that they would be a little 3-person family. Like, I just don't. They were broken. And I didn't really believe it when they said there's still love between us back then. But this scene, I mean, to me was like, yeah, there's no love here.
As an individual character, neglecting the fact that he's Hannah's dad, we have seen Luke go from a fairly passive guy.
Oh my gosh, super passive.
You know, you've mentioned that he's a guy that can't seem to absorb the hints that life is throwing him about what is going on around you and what you should be doing to respond properly to those things. He is adapted quite a bit. You know, he's taking charge. He's taking responsibility. He's going to the front. They are trying to get New York back. Mm-hmm. And that's a big undertaking.
I agree. When you think about where he was at the very, very beginning, like, I mean, he was trying to tell Moira and June, like, to cool out. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Nothing's really happening. Like, I mean, he was kind of an obstructionist to starting to fight more.
It was like, what was the the bit where they were learning that women can't take money out of their bank accounts
Yeah,
or
and
something like that.
and he was just like, well, that's weird.
He's like, well, I'll sign it for you or whatever he said.
And it was just like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, yeah, no, he was not taking this seriously at all. You know, of course, June always blames him for the actual scene where Hannah was taken because he just became like completely useless instantly. Even though he had a gun. Remember, he just fumbled around. Blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So messy. But you're right. He did grow. He did change. Certainly they did, you know, they both grew and changed within their relationship. I mean, do you honestly think they ever could sleep? I remember we were talking about, I was going to say sleep in the same bed, but remember we were talking about that scene when she does come back to Canada and they do go to the hotel and they had that super weird rough sex and it was all strange and Luke was pissed at her and it was like really messy. Like, I don't think you come back from all that. Like, I feel like this interaction between the two of them and that scene, like, yeah, that tracks. Which, like, so the interim of like, you know, we love each other was like, no, not like you used to. Not, I mean, no. And you have a common goal only sort of, because when she said, I'm going to go find Hannah, what else is there? He had an answer like, well, there's some other stuff I'm going to go do. And I think it was supposed to be poignant. Like, what else is there? And he's like, oh, well, I could fix the electricity. And like, no, it was rhetorical.
Right. Well, and an answer that you weren't supposed to give was, well, you do have Nicole.
Oh my gosh. Let's talk about that.
And
okay.
Nicole isn't actually my.
Okay, y'all, let's talk about that for a hot second. Okay, so we have Holly that comes back in. Now, I appreciate that this entire episode does feel like one of those reunion shows where you like bring back as many characters as you possibly can. So I understand that we needed Holly to come in and introduce the idea of writing the book. We need to have Nicole be seen for like one last time and know that she's like with Mayday and all that kind of stuff because we're moving forward to the Testaments, right? But you bust them from Alaska. Now, of course, you could say, Caroline, I'm sure they were on a plane at some point and then they took them. I understand. But you get what I'm saying. Like,
oh, yeah.
Alaska was safe. And like, yeah, we got a foothold in Boston, but it's only been 19 days.
Right.
I mean, is it really safe to bring your baby back here? I'm not so sure. Or your elderly mother who, again, had a home, was safe and was just like logistically far away from the fight. To your point too, you said, and now they have to come just with what they could carry on a bus, like in a backpack or something, and like this is all their belongings.
Is dumb. I mean, it was just a bad idea. When you're watching it, like you're explaining, it doesn't make sense. That
it's not practical.
Gilead is going to want that area back just on pride.
I gotta think so.
You know?
Yes.
So what are you inviting these people who aren't combatants into a war zone for?
And let's also be supersonic clear. June Osborne is a known name, as would her child be. And so I feel like if you were going to come, even if you just brought one sniper into Boston from Gilead, who are they hunting for? June, her mother, and her kids. You know, like these are the people you would go for. I don't know. It was really odd. And plus, just like the way that was filmed, when Holly like hands her Nicole is like screeching. Like it's not a happy moment. It's really like chaotic and the baby is upset. Like it is not happy to see its mother at all. And then so instantly we have this bomb dropped of like, so I'm gonna have to leave you again. Ooh, okay.
Mommy's got to keep all the other little girls safe.
Which was a sweet thing to say, but holy smokes, then why not leave her in Alaska where she's safe?
No, it's better to be in this room full of refugees laying on cots 6 inches apart from each other.
And again, like no diapers and no kid stuff and whatever. Like, huh? It's crazy. Where would she even get that onesie, by the way? Like, the more I'm thinking about it.
There was basically like a clothing room where if you had nothing, you could go into that.
No, yeah, I know. But I mean, how would that have survived? I mean, if Boston was taken over and like they would have like destroyed stuff, how would there have been like I don't know. I know that is like the silliest thing of all things, but like how? What?
Yeah, maybe I can't even think. It'd have to be like a thrift store situation. Maybe they were living above a Goodwill.
Oh my gosh, super funny. The big deal, though, of introducing Holly, obviously, is for her to talk to June about writing the book. That's huge. And the only reason why I'm ignoring all the rest of the impracticality of bringing this baby and this elderly woman back into a war zone, because this conversation is so very important.
But is it weird that Luke also said, hey, you should write this down?
To me, yes. And it like really does take like the wind out of the fact that Holly said it, those sales. Like, I really wish it was just because the story to me is not about husband and wives. The story to me is about mothers and children. And so for Holly to talk to June as mom, daughter, and then say, write for your daughters, like that's the beautiful storytelling of it all. Luke telling her to do it is like, get out of here. Get out of here with that, you. Like, we're not listening to you. Again, going back to the flashbacks too, I would have really liked her to have a little flashback then to her back at being a book editor and like have a little moment where you remind us that she was that into writing and that into books, that this actually does make complete sense. She's not just anybody picking up a pen. She's somebody who used to work in this industry. And of course, I think it's like a big nod to Margaret Atwood, which is like the power of books, right? I mean, we talk about Serena Joy's book. Now we're talking about June writing a book. I mean, to me, it says like authors are so powerful, and books are so powerful. So I thought that was very beautiful.
I didn't even catch that, but yeah, I like that.
What I did like about that final conversation too is how worried Holly was about keeping her baby June safe. And being like, how are you going to do this? Like, who's going to keep you safe? And just the idea that no one can be safe, Mom, if we don't fight. And in fact, this happened because we were reluctant to fight. And we like put up with stuff for way too long before it got so out of hand that we couldn't go backwards again. I think, again, that was a really important message to the viewers, really important, again, going back to that theme of hope and fighting and keep fighting, and Holly allowed us to have that conversation. Okay, so let's jump into June and actually writing the book. Now, you read The Handmaid's Tale, so you have this awesome foundation for the context of this book. And in fact, you're going to read some passages for us. Every which way that you saw this playing out, with her walking up there, the totally burned out Waterford house, like how amazing was that?
It's satisfying to see, because it's a monument to,
hellhole, man.
All the bad things.
Yeah. And even her having the chance to glance up to Nick's window and have that little like sort of moment was special, I thought. For me, I had seen this clip that I had forgotten about a long time ago. It must have been from season 1. Apologize if it wasn't. But she is having to go to the doctor. And Serena Joy comes in and says like a car is going to take her. And she had been so looking forward to the walk to the doctor because she was going to get a chance to see the sky and see the flowers and all that again. And she was so longing for that back in season 1. So for me, when she goes up to the bedroom and the wall is blown out of the side and it's like the sky is over her bedroom, felt like amazing cinematography and like just such an amazing callback to that awful scene at the beginning.
All the stuff leading up to the Waterford's house felt very deliberate. And as we have read elsewhere, Bruce Miller had an ending in mind. And I believe that's probably it.
I do too.
That scene might have been written years ago.
Yeah, it could have been written 10 years ago, like, I mean, it could have been written when he read the book or whatever, when it was like, how do I want June to actually sit down and start to write this? And, again, like you're going to share some passages with us that explains like the tape recorder and like show some really great parallels between the book and how it was all set up here for us at the end where she was like writing the actual book. I was very satisfied with this. Again, it feels like fighting fire with fire when you have like Serena's book versus June's book. There's something about that feels so balanced and so right to fight with your words and to fight with the written word. I think that it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And it was a really great wrap up of not just the season, but the series. And that's something I do want to ask you, like, what do you feel like as a whole for this series, especially because you came in, God, my God, we're such babies 8 years ago. You know, we're coming into this. I've never read the book. You had read the book. Now, having watched the entire series, would you recommend it to other people? Would you rewatch it? Is it a rewatchable show for you?
In general, it goes to pretty bleak places that I don't know that I need to revisit the entire thing. However, if you're a fan of dystopian science fiction, I probably would recommend it, maybe with a caveat about how final do you need your finale to be satisfied with your time spent watching the entire show. A lot of people will change how they feel about the entire run of a show if they feel like the finale didn't stick the landing. Even though they were given 70 episodes that they liked, if the finale isn't any good, it's a waste of my life. You've wasted my life for years and years. And I don't understand that thinking.
Yeah. And I feel badly for the people who didn't listen to our podcast, who are completely floored that they didn't get Hannah back. Because we had been really kind to our listeners, I think, in saying, guys, Gilead's not going to fall. This is a battle within a war. It's not going to fall. And there's still another battle to be fought to get Hannah. So please don't put strikes against the finale for them not getting Hannah back, because that's not the point of this part of the larger story. And for a lot of people who maybe just don't choose to read entertainment news or, you know, don't follow along with stuff, if they don't realize the testaments are coming and they don't understand that Hannah is like a major figure in it, then I wonder how blindsided people really did feel about this. I have seen clips of people being really mad that they didn't get Hannah back. But again, that's kind of the folly of the flashbacks. Quit playing Hannah flashbacks. That wasn't the finale here. The finale was June. The finale was June sitting down and writing her story. It wasn't getting Hannah. Hannah's a longer story.
Yeah.
And so stop showing us those flashbacks of Hannah. We understand. We get it. And for a lot of people who took this story at just straight face value, it was June needing to get Hannah. That's it. That's what we're doing for 6 seasons. Even though there was a tremendous amount of story told outside of just that. It became reduced to that for some people. And I think for those people, I don't know how you're not disappointed. I think for some of us, like me and you, we wanted to hear the story of how we got to June writing the story of The Handmaid's Tale. And I was even shocked to see that some people were thinking that The Handmaid's Tale might have actually been thinking some other character wrote. I thought that was so wild. I thought it was just so telegraphed that it was always going to be June's story. What are you talking about? You know, like someone said, like, well, maybe Serena Joy would have. What? No. It has to be June. It could only be June.
Going back to the book, the first season is basically the text of the book, with the exception of an epilogue that Margaret Atwood added, I believe, after the original publication of the book. That was kind of an ending, because if you remember the way the first season ends, there's just these eyes that come and get her. And that's exactly how the book ends. It is sort of like this. It's sort of like, we're not done yet. What do you mean it's over? And that's the way the book ends. So it is true to that original intent of the book. When I say sort of ending, I mean like a gigantic fast forward, and none of the characters from the main part of the book are in that epilogue.
No, because it's so far in the future.
Right. So you leave with a sense that things will get better, but only in like a general sense, not like, is it going to get better for the characters we like or not? You don't know that.
Right. And I always go back to that same line that better for some means like worse for others. And I'm just paraphrasing that. And it makes me wonder, like, how much Janine or Lydia or even Naomi or anyone else there, although I really want to just focus on Janine and Lydia, how much suffering did they do over in Gilead during those 19 days? Like, what happened to them in many ways? Like, again, better for some, worse for others, you know, and what is happening back in Gilead now with Lydia having somehow been reinstated as the aunt and having all this stuff go on. I did ask you a question about that like, I do want to hear, I don't know what we think about this. Because so many of the people who are at the gallows died, any of the people having to do with Gilead, I wondered if Lydia's big moment where she like completely, denounces Gilead was actually conveyed to anyone outside the area, because Wharton's blown up and all this other stuff. So who would have said that Lydia was a traitor there at the end or whatever? And maybe if that information didn't get back to anybody, because everybody, if it was just sort of chalked up to a giant riot that happened and no one ever said well, what did the women say before they were about to be hung? If nobody asked that question, which I can't imagine many commanders did,
right,
then maybe it slipped under the radar that she actually did what she did.
I think that's probably right.
Because that way she could be reinstated in sort of oh my God, that was so crazy.
One of the things that is admitted in that epilogue I just described of the first book is that the reason that Gilead has been so hard to dissect for the future people is that they kept really shitty records, especially wherever it concerned women. It was almost like we don't even, why would we bother writing that stuff down?
So to my point, no one would say, what did the women say right before they were about to be hung? No one's going to ask that question.
They might not have even had a roster of the people to be hanged that day.
Yeah. So, yeah, which is wild. And you're so right to point that out about the book, that they explain that the records were so bad and no one was keeping great records. That's such a huge part of the world building for us to understand. And that's why they could slip in and out. That's why the red cloak was enough to be hidden, because although they had the ear tags, no one was ever scanning those. No one was ever doing anything with those in a way that made it feel like it mattered, their individual. Because you're right, they weren't individuals to Gilead. They were just uteruses, if you will, uterize.
Right.
Whatever the plural of uterus is. Yes, it's crazy. So you guys, at this point, Paul has a passage that he was found in the book that if you do not want to be spoiled in any way, then we just want to thank you guys so much for listening and for following along with us. We do plan to cover the Testaments, and we definitely cannot wait to continue this story with you. But Paul's going to give some context to how they found June's story in the future and exactly where some of the small details that they did show us in the finale do play a wonderful homage to the book. So stop now if you don't want to hear that. Thanks you guys so much for listening, and here's Paul.
All right. So at the end of the Handmaid's Tale book, the original text, there's a section called Historical Notes, which is interesting when you get to that part because you're reading about something that feels a little like the future. And in a section with italics, it says, being a partial transcript of the proceedings of the 12th Symposium on Gileadian Studies, held as part of the International Historical Association Convention, which took place at the University of Denay, Nunavut, on June 25th, 2195. So we jump ahead quite a bit. The speaker is going to be Professor James Darcy Piahotto, Director, 20th and 21st Century Archives, Cambridge University, England. And he approaches the material as an academic might, sort of a detachment. There are going to be some moments here where he makes jokes that are not funny, but they are to the crowd because they're all academics like he is.
And it's so far removed. Be clear about that.
All right, here we go. But let me be serious. I wish, as the title of my little chat implies, to consider some of the problems associated with the soi-disant manuscript, which is well known to all of you by now, and which goes by the title of The Handmaid's Tale. I say soi-disant because what we have before us is not the item in its original form. Strictly speaking, it was not a manuscript at all when first discovered and bore no title. The superscription The Handmaid's Tale was appended to it by Professor Wade, partly in homage to the great Geoffrey Chaucer, but those of you who know Professor Wade informally as I do will understand when I say that I am sure all puns were very intentional, particularly that having to do with the archaic, vulgar signification of the word tale, that being to some extent the bone, as it were, of contention in that phase of Gileadian society of which our saga treats. See, that's a joke. Yeah. The item, I hesitate to use the word document, was unearthed on the site of what was once the city of Bangor, in what at the time prior to the inception of the Gileadian regime would have been the state of Maine. We know that this city was a prominent way station on what our author refers to as the Underground Female Road, since dubbed by some of our historical wags the Underground Frail Road. More groans and laughter. For this reason, our association has taken a particular interest in it. Okay, so she goes on to describe the footlocker. Within this footlocker, which was sealed with tape of the kind once used on packages to be sent by post, were approximately 30 tape cassettes of the type that became obsolete sometime in the 80s or 90s with the advent of the compact disc. So it's important that we see her using a little recording device at the end of the episode, that there would be these artifacts for the future society to unearth in this footlocker. There were some 30 tapes in the collection altogether, with varying proportions of music to spoken word. In general, each tape begins with 2 or 3 songs, as camouflage, no doubt. Then the music is broken off and the speaking voice takes over. The voice is a woman's, and according to our voice print experts, the same one throughout. The labels on the cassettes were authentic period labels, dating, of course, from some time before the inception of the early Gilead era, as all such secular music was banned under the regime. There were, for instance, 4 tapes entitled Elvis Presley's Golden Years, 3 of Folk Songs of Lithuania, 3 of Boy George Takes It Off, and 2 of Mantovani's Mellow Strings, as well as some 8 titles that sported a mere single tape each, such as Twisted Sister at Carnegie Hall. Jumping ahead 1 paragraph. Once we had the transcription in hand, and we had to go over it several times owing to the difficulties posed by accent, obscure reference, and archaisms, we had to make some decision as to the nature of the material we had thus so laboriously acquired. Several possibilities confronted us. First, the tapes might be a forgery, and then they go on to discuss the authenticity of the tapes, which is extensive. All right, so they start to talk about the formation of Gilead and how it ties to the decline in the birth rate. The reasons for this decline are not altogether clear to us. Some of the failure to reproduce can undoubtedly be traced to the widespread availability of birth control of various kinds, including abortion, in the immediate pre-Gilead period. Some infertility, then, was willed, which may account for the differing statistics among Caucasians and non-Caucasians, but the rest was not. Need I remind you that this was the age of the R-strain syphilis and also of the infamous AIDS epidemic, which, once they spread to the population at large, eliminated many young sexually active people from the reproductive pool. Stillbirths, miscarriages, and genetic deformities were widespread and on the increase, and this trend has been linked to the various nuclear plant accidents, shutdowns, and incidents of sabotage that characterized the period, as well as to leakages from chemical and biological warfare stockpiles and toxic waste disposal sites, of which there were many thousands, both legal and illegal. In some instances, these materials were simply dumped into the sewage system, and to the uncontrolled use of chemical insecticides, herbicides, and other sprays. So they're trying to come up with a reason for the decline in birth rate, but to me, Caroline, did it sound like they weren't sure either? They were just sort of...
absolutely. It's so far in the future, you guys. It's like 150 years in the future. So, yeah, I mean, especially since we discussed they didn't keep records like we would have liked them to, then we don't know exactly what they were doing.
He goes on. But whatever the causes, the effects were noticeable, and the Gilead regime was not the only one to react to them at the time. Romania, spelled Rumania, for instance, had anticipated Gilead in the 80s by banning all forms of birth control, imposing compulsory pregnancy tests on the female population, and linking promotion and wage increases to fertility. That's interesting. Remember the virility conversation from earlier in the Lawrence household? The need for what I may call birth services was already recognized in the pre-Gilead period, where it was being inadequately met by artificial insemination, fertility clinics, and the use of surrogate mothers who were hired for the purpose. Gilead outlawed the first 2 as irreligious, but legitimized and enforced the third, which was considered to have biblical precedence. They thus replaced the serial polygamy common in the pre-Gilead period with the older form of simultaneous polygamy practiced both in early Old Testament times and in the former state of Utah in the 19th century. As we know from the study of history, no new system can impose itself upon a previous one without incorporating many of the elements to be found in the latter. As witness the pagan elements in medieval Christianity and the evolution of the Russian KGB from the Tsarist secret service that preceded it, and Gilead was no exception to this rule. Its racist policies, for instance, were firmly rooted in the pre-Gilead period, and racist fears provided some of the emotional fuel that allowed the Gilead takeover to succeed as well as it did. Our author, then, was one of many and must be seen within the broad outlines of the moment in history of which she was a part. But what else do we know about her apart from her age, some physical characteristics that could be anyone's, and her place of residence? Not very much. She appears to have been an educated woman insofar as a graduate of any North American college of the time can be said to have been educated. But the woods, as you say, were full of these, so that's no help. She does not see fit to supply us with her original name, and indeed all official records of it would have been destroyed upon her entry into the Rachel and Leah Re-Education Center. Just a little side note for me and you, it's like you have to read it out loud, Re-Education Center, to understand why all of a sudden they just shortened it to Red Center.
I found that so fascinating because, I don't know, I always thought it had to do with the color of their clothes.
I did too. I did too.
Or the Rachel...
And Leah.
Like somehow there was like a, like they pulled letters from that.
Offred gives no clue, since like of Glen and of Warren, it was a patronymic composed of the possessive preposition and the first name of the gentleman in question. Such names were taken by these women upon their entry into a connection with the household of a specific commander and relinquished by them upon leaving it. The other names in the document are equally useless for the purposes of identification and authentication. Luke and Nick drew blanks, as did Moira and Janine. There's a high probability that these were in any case pseudonyms, adopted to protect these individuals should the tapes be discovered. If so, this would substantiate our view that the tapes were made inside the borders of Gilead rather than outside, to be smuggled back for use by the Mayday underground. So there's quite a long passage about trying to figure out who the commander is, because that might help sort out who the author is. If they can figure out who the commander was, they might be able to figure out who his handmaids were. So they've narrowed it down to Fred Waterford and Commander Frederick Judd. And that stems from a document provided by Wilfred Limpkin, who was a sociobiologist in Gilead. So I'm going to start with that. From the Limpkin material, we know that there are two possible candidates, that is, two whose names incorporate the element Fred, Frederick R. Waterford and B. Frederick Judd. No photographs survive of either, although Limpkin describes the latter as a stuffed shirt, and I quote, "somebody for whom foreplay is what you do on a golf course."
Gross.
Limpkin himself did not long survive the inception of Gilead, and we have his diary only because he foresaw his own end and placed it with his sister-in-law in Calgary. Waterford and Judd both have characteristics that recommend them to us. Waterford possessed a background in market research and was, according to Limpkin, responsible for the design of the female costumes and for the suggestion that the handmaids wear red, which he seems to have borrowed from the uniforms of German prisoners in the war in Canada POW camps of the Second World War era. He seems to have been the originator of the term particution, which he lifted from an exercise program popular sometime in the last third of the century. The collective rope ceremony, however, was suggested by an English village custom of the 17th century. Salvaging may have been his too, although by the time of Gilead's inception, it had spread from its origin in the Philippines to become a general term for the elimination of one's political enemies. As I have said elsewhere, there was little that was truly original or indigenous to Gilead. Its genius was synthesis. So they go on to describe Judd, which, as we know, is not important at all.
Because we know it's Waterford.
As we know it's Waterford. In this connection, a few comments upon the crack female control agency known as the Ants is perhaps in order. Judd, according to the Limpkin material, was of the opinion from the outset that the best and most cost-effective way to control women for reproductive and other purposes was through women themselves. For this, there were many historical precedents. In fact, no empire imposed by force or otherwise has ever been without this feature. Control of the indigenous by members of their own group. In the case of Gilead, there were many women willing to serve as ants, either because of a genuine belief in what they had called traditional values, or for the benefits they might thereby acquire. When power is scarce, a little of it is tempting. There was, too, a negative inducement. Childless or infertile or older women who were not married could take service in the ants and thereby escape redundancy and consequent shipment to the infamous colonies, which were composed of portable populations used mainly as expendable toxic cleanup squads. The idea then was Judd's, but the implementation has the mark of Waterford upon it. Who else among the Sons of Jacob think tank would have come up with the notion that the ants should take names derived from commercial products available to women in the immediate pre-Gilead period and thus familiar and reassuring to them? The names of cosmetic lines, cake mixes, frozen desserts, and even medicinal remedies? It was a brilliant stroke and confirms us in our opinion that Waterford was, in his prime, a man of considerable ingenuity. But the evidence, on the whole, favors Waterford. We know, for instance, that he met his end probably soon after the events our author describes, in one of the earliest purges. He was accused of liberal tendencies, of being in possession of a substantial and unauthorized collection of heretical, pictorial, and literary materials, and of harboring a subversive. This was before the regime began holding its trials in secret and was still televising them. So the events were recorded in England via satellite and are on videotape deposit in our archives. The shots of Waterford are not good, but they are clear enough to establish that his hair was indeed gray. That's one difference, if you can't recall that, between the Waterfords of the book versus the Waterfords of the show, was the Waterfords in the book were much older. Not just a little older, much older.
And the credit is going to Fred, not Serena.
In the book, Serena is an entertainer, like a singer, like the mom from the Righteous Gemstones, like that.
Okay.
Not a influential author.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the they actually flipped it around, made Serena be a lot of the stuff that they're describing Fred as.
As for the subversive Waterford was accused of harboring, this could have been Offred herself, as her flight would have placed her in this category. More likely it was Nick, who by the evidence of the very existence of the tapes must have helped Offred to escape. The way in which he was able to do this marks him as a member of the shadowy Mayday underground, which was not identical with the underground female road, but had connections within it. The latter was purely a rescue operation, the former quasi-military. A number of Mayday operatives are known to have infiltrated the Gileadian power structure at the highest levels, and the placement of one of their members as chauffeur to Waterford would certainly have been a coup, a double coup, as Nick must have been at the time a member of the Eyes, as such chauffeurs and personal servants often were. Waterford would, of course, have been aware of this, but all high-level commanders were automatically directors of the Eyes. He would not have paid a great deal of attention to it and would not have let it interfere with his infractions of what he considered to be minor rules. Like most early Gilead commanders who were later purged, he considered his position to be above attack. The style of Middle Gilead was more cautious. I think we saw some of this in the show, where there was new commanders kind of coming up with different ideas than some of the original commanders. Mm-hmm. It's not that we saw a lot of them get phased out or purged or whatever, but you still kind of got the sense that what was going to happen to Lawrence was the same kind of thing that they're talking about here. But then he admits that this is guesswork. He says, "This is our guesswork. Supposing it to be correct, supposing, that is, that Waterford was indeed the commander, many gaps remain. Some of them could have been filled by our anonymous author had she had a different turn of mind. She could have told us much about the workings of the Gileadian Empire had she had the instincts of a reporter or a spy. What would we not give now for even 20 pages or so of printout from Waterford's private computer? However, we must be grateful for any crumbs the goddess of history has deigned to vouchsafe for us. That's a very interesting little thing, though, because the goddess of history is capitalized. So this is a future society, that these people are living in. Their names suggest that the diversity that we see today, if you fast forwarded people of different backgrounds having kids, you'd wind up with people that have names that reflect all the different places that they come from. And so the idea of like a polytheistic belief system
And a female.
Right. So that might just be. As for the ultimate fate of our narrator, it remains obscure. Was she smuggled over the border of Gilead into what was then Canada? And did she make her way thence to England? This would have been wise, as the Canada of that time did not wish to antagonize its powerful neighbor, and there were roundups and extradition of such refugees. If so, why did she not take her taped narrative with her? Perhaps her journey was sudden. Perhaps she feared interception. On the other hand, she may have been recaptured. If she did indeed reach England, why did she not make her story public, as so many did upon reaching the outside world? She may have feared retaliation against Luke, supposing him to have been still alive, which is an improbability, or even against her daughter, for the Gileadian regime was not above such measures and used them to discourage adverse publicity in foreign countries. More than one incautious refugee was known to receive a hand, ear, or foot vacuum-packed express, hidden in, for instance, a tin of coffee.
Oh my God.
Or perhaps she was among those escaped handmaids who had difficulty adjusting to life in the outside world once they got there after the protected existence they had led. She may have become, like them, a recluse. We do not know. We can only deduce also the motivations for Nick's engineering of her escape. We can assume that once her companion of Glenn's, that's Emily, association with Mayday had been discovered, he himself was in some jeopardy. For as he well knew, as a member of the Eyes, Offred herself was certain to be interrogated. The penalties for unauthorized sexual activity with a handmaid were severe, nor would his status as an Eye necessarily protect him. Gilead society was Byzantine in the extreme, and any transgression might be used against one by one's undeclared enemies within the regime. He could, of course, have assassinated her himself, which might have been the wiser course, but the human heart remains a factor, and as we know, both of them thought she might be pregnant by him. What male of the Gilead period could resist the possibility of fatherhood so redolent of status, so highly prized? Instead, he called in a rescue team of the Eyes, who may or may not have been authentic, but in any case were under his orders. In doing so, he may well have brought about his own downfall. This, too, we shall never know. You'll have to think back to the end of season 1 to see why all that makes sense with what happened. Did our narrator reach the outside world safely and build a new life for herself? Or was she discovered in her attic hiding place, arrested, sent to the colonies or Jezebel's, or even executed? Our document, though in its own way eloquent, is on these subjects mute. So that's pretty much where he ends his speech there. So that could be a clue, because in the previous predictions on this podcast, I said that June kind of has to recede.
Yeah.
And that was a guess, but it kind of sounds like it, because the future doesn't know who she is exactly. So somehow she gets separated from her story.
Right. And it sounds like it was never written into a book. It was just, that's why it was interesting to me that she has the little recorder at the end of the actual televised series, because that is so beautifully reflective of the text, of finding these tapes and all this stuff. And obviously, you guys, that is like a dense portion. If you guys choose to read the book, Paul did read some other sections to me and stuff. And we were kind of talking about the different areas, and the actual story part is more accessible in terms of this sounded like this was kind of rough academic reading, but when you get into the part where they're just telling the story, that part is much easier to read.
Very.
This was like a guest lecture type of
yes
so it's much more academic.
It's a testament to Atwood's ability to create character with
different voices.
Yeah.
Surely. Yeah. So you guys, this was a heck of a series. We definitely recommend it to others. We chose to stay away from all the real world references, but I know you guys can go back and find so many. One of the beautiful things about Atwood's writing is that she chose to put nothing in her story that had not had a historical basis in it, that hadn't either was currently happening in the world or had happened in the world. So you could spend a whole lot of time drawing connections and analyzing her beautiful book. So one last time, this is Caroline.
And this is Paul. Please head over to podclubhouse.com or iTunes or Spotify and look up Pod Clubhouse and see what other podcasts we offer on shows that you're interested in. We have Caroline and Mike returning later this year with The Gilded Age, which is a very well-made show on HBO. We also have our coverage of any of the cons and festivals that we are attending this summer.
Yeah, we're so excited for that. And our the next one that's coming up is ATX TV Festival in Austin, Texas, which will be happening the weekend of May 29th through June 1st. So please head over and make sure you subscribe to our Press Pass coverage so that you can hear all about the different panels and amazing things that we're going to see and tell you about.
And when you do that, leave us a rating and a review, and that'll help other people find those podcasts and pictures and all the stuff that we enjoy sharing with you also.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.
Pod Clubhouse.